Okay, so we're doing lesson 1-1. It's just an introduction into algebra. Basically, it's vocabulary and how to write multiplication and division in algebra. I know that you've already done this. This is just a review. Okay, so there's arithmetic, which is what we do in 6th, 7th, and part of 8th, and then there's algebra, which we start at towards the end of 8th grade. And there's different ways that you write with numbers and letters in algebra. You don't want to use the X symbol anymore. You're going to see it in our order of operations a little bit, but you want to try to get out of the habit of using the X as multiplication and the division sign for division, because we can get those mixed up with variables. So the way that we did it in just regular math or arithmetic is we wrote it as 2 times 5, with times being the X. We're going to write them using a dot. They call it a raised dot. And we're going to write it with parentheses, and then we're going to write it side by side if we can. So with 2 times 5, we, instead of writing it with the X, we'll write it with a dot. Okay. Or we'll write it with parentheses. Okay. We cannot write 2 numbers side by side to represent multiplication, because if we were to write it side by side, it would now be 25 rather than 2 times 5. So we can't do that with 2 numbers. That's okay. My preference for 2 numbers side by side would be this one right here. But does that mean that you will get it wrong if you write it with a dot? No, it won't. Okay. That's just my preference. Moving on to the next one, 2xx. That's what that looks like to me, because I'm an algebra teacher. I see an x and I think of a variable, but they're trying to write 2 times x. Okay, so instead of writing it with an x, you'll write it with a raised dot, a parenthesis, or because we have a variable in the mix, you can write it side by side. And I will tell you that this is my preferred choice, and you will find that this is what you will be doing. All right, we're going to move on to division. In division, we no longer write the division sign. What is another way to write division? Fractions. That's right. Fractions are division. Fractions. One of those. So 2 divided by 5 is the same as 2/5. So that fraction bar, you can substitute that for division, okay? And then 2 divided by x, 2 divided by x. Okay. Any questions about that so far? All right. So I told my other class, I do go a little bit fast, especially on lessons that are like you, but if you need to stop, slow down, do whatever, please tell me. Do not be afraid to do so. If you are, tell your partner to ask me to slow down. Also, my notes will be posted on Canvas. If you miss something, you can always come back and watch the video if you miss something. So just know that there are multiple ways to get the information if I'm going too fast. All right, so in your textbook, you will have problems that will say, indicate multiplication using parentheses, and then without using a raised dot. Okay, that's a little bit confusing. Without using a raised dot means side by side. Okay. This is what it says in your textbook. So that's why I wrote it this way. And when you're doing your homework, it's always important to go back and look at your notes, because I have things in the notes that are similar to what will be on your homework, so you can kind of get a guide as to how to solve the problem. So what I want you to do right now is I'm going to do example 1 with you, but then you're going to do examples 2 and 3 on your own. Okay, so it says indicate multiplication using parentheses. So 3 times x. Well, I can write it as 3 times x. And then side by side, 3x. So on your homework, it's going to be just like this as well. Right? So I want you to do example 2 and 3 on your own or with your partner. Okay? And don't be afraid to talk. right, I'm gonna write them up here so you can check. So these are the different ways that you can write them. Now, the 1/4 y could also be written as y/4. Either way works, whatever makes most sense to you. Just know that if you ever see it as a variable over a number, then it is, you know, it could also be in this case 1/4 y. And then, any questions about this? Okay. All right, we're gonna go down to how to read exponents in algebra. The first 4 are basic ones that you've already seen, but just a quick review of how that works. And then we're gonna get down to some with variables that you may not have seen and been able to, or practice reading. Some of you have, some of you haven't. Okay, so with exponents, you have a base. And then you have a raised number, which is your exponent. So in this case, our base is 5. Does anyone know what the exponent is when you don't see it? Yeah. 1, not 0, because if you have an exponent of 0, like 5 to the power of 0, the whole thing equals 1. So don't ever say 0, because then that changes the whole number. So the exponent here is 1. All it is read as 5 in words. And the meaning, or what does 5 to the power of 1 equal? It equals 5. That's it. Simple. Now let's go to the next one. The base number again is 5. Your exponent is 2. In this case, it is read as in words. When I say read as in words, it's read as 5 squared. And the meaning is not 5 times 2, which a lot of people will do that. They'll say 5 times 2, so 5 squared equals 10. That's not what it is. It's 5 times 5, which equals 25. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay, on your own or with your partner, I want you to do the next 2 on your, I want you to do the next 2. Okay, so the base, 5, our exponent, it's read as 5 cubed. And it equals 15, right? No. Good. 5 times 5 times 5 equals 125. Good job. All right. So then this one, we have 5, 4. What did you guys, how did you read this one? 5 to the power of 4. 5 to the power of 4, 5 to the 4th power, 5 raised to the power of 4. Power is important. A lot of students will say 5/4. No, it's not 54, or 5/4. No, it's not 1 1/4. It's 5 to the power of 4. So I'm just going to put 4th power. But 5 to the power of 4 is also correct, so don't change that. So then we have 5 times 5 times 5 times 5, which equals 635. Good job. All right. Cool. Okay, now variables. Can anyone tell me, raise your hand if you tell me what you think the base is here? A and B, right? Okay, so we have 2 bases. We have an A. I'm going to separate that by a comma, and a B, because they're 2 separate bases with 2 separate exponents. This one down here is actually AB. With that, it doesn't need to be separated, or it can be separated. I'm going to show you that in a minute. So we have AB. Our exponents are, anyone else know? 1,3. And then you read it as A times B cubed. And the meaning is in two different ways, A times B times B times B, which is a raised dot, or you could do side by side, A, B, B, B. I would not use parentheses in that case, in this case, because that's just way too much work, right? But you can, and it doesn't change the meaning or the value of it, it's just a lot longer. All right, the next one is AB in parentheses raised to the power of 3. And another way to write this, and I'm not sure if you've learned this already, but that 3 on the outside of the parenthesis applies to both terms inside the parenthesis. So this means A cubed, B cubed. You can write that right below that. A cubed, B cubed. And if you can't read my writing, just ask me. So in this case, we have 2 bases. So what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and do this one on your own real quick. Finish it. Now, if you read it as something else, don't erase it yet. I want to see what you wrote. Did anyone write something different than what I wrote? Okay, that would work. Yeah, so that one would just be A times B raised cubed, or A times B raised to the power of 3. Now let me tell you what the confusion could be, because that's what this one is, right? So how do I know that I'm talking about this or this? Right, so that's why I put A cubed times B cubed. Now on your homework, because it can be written a couple of different ways, I would take that into consideration. All right, so just keep that in mind. Okay, let's do this last one. Can anyone tell me what they think the base is to this? Just raise your hand. Grace? Okay, so in this case, it would be, which you're right, it's 3 minus x. Okay, so 3 minus x is your base. And the exponent we can see is 2. And in this case, it would be 3 minus x, and I'm going to put a comma, squared. The comma tells me that 3 minus x is in parentheses. Another way you could write it is the difference of 3 and x squared. That's probably the most algebraic way to say it, but I would see it. And then did you guys multiply binomials last year? Yes. Okay, so this would be 3 minus x times 3 minus x. That's a binomial. So you're squaring it. So a lot of students want to say 3 squared minus x squared, but that's not how this one is. Anytime you see an operation in the middle, do that. But you could here because there's no like addition or subtraction. Don't worry too much about this bottom one for right now. Okay, I want you to, you're going to do the bottom, And it says identify the base and the exponent in each expression. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna write a B and tell me what the base is, and you're gonna write E and tell me what the exponent is. And if there's multiple ones, just separate them by commas, okay? So go ahead and do this on your own or with the partner. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and work through these. So our base, for example, 4 is A, and our exponent is 8. And your homework is going to read just like this, and this is how you'll do it on your homework. Example 5, our base is 3, A, and B. Our exponents are 1, 3, and 9. If you miss the 1, I'm okay with that. The next one, our bases are 10, X, Y, Z. And our exponents are 1, 5, 6. I would not. You don't have to repeat them. Yeah, you can. It won't be wrong if you do. You just don't have to. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the back. So on the back, we're just talking about how to read the vocabulary of an equation or an expression. Okay, so here is an equation right here. And the reason that it is an equation is because it has an equal sign. Okay, if I did not have this part with the equal sign, it would be considered an expression. So the difference is expressions don't have an equal sign, equations do. I think equations has the base word equal. So let's start up at the top. Term is a set of numbers and letters. Terms are separated by an operation. Now I want you to cross off the multiplication and division sign. Terms are separated by addition and subtraction below. So for example, we have, and an equal sign. Up here, put equal. Okay, so addition, subtraction, and equal sign. So in this case, we have 3 terms. We have 5x and 7 because they're separated by an addition symbol. And then we have the square root of 2 because it's separated by an equal sign. So we have 3 terms there, okay? If there isn't an addition, a subtraction, or an equal sign, then it's just one full term, okay? A coefficient is a number in front of a letter. So in this case, 5. Is 7 a coefficient? No, because it doesn't have a letter with it, a variable. And then the letters are all variables. So there's only one variable in this equation, that would be x. So we talked about equations, expression, coefficient, term, and variables. And again, I know that this is all review, so I'm gonna move on. All right. So let's look at these 4 examples. The directions tell us to identify the coefficient, variables, and number of terms. And this is what it will say in your homework. So when we're going to identify the coefficient, we're going to represent that by a C. Variables, just represent that by a V. And the number of terms, we're going to represent by a T. Now in algebra, please curve your T. Otherwise, I think it's an addition sign. Sometimes the book will show a T as a variable. I don't ever use T's as variables because they do look like addition, but if they do, this is how you would write it. Okay, so in this case, our coefficient is, anyone? Well, it's the number in front of a letter. Okay, our variables would be all of the letters. So it's JESDAN. Okay, try to be creative. Just Dan, because I'm Jessica and my husband's Daniel. And you can separate those by commas. Now, remember the definition of term is numbers and letters that are separated by addition, subtraction, or an equal sign. Do you see any of that? So it's just one term. Okay, so we just have one term there. Any questions? Okay, let's go to example 8. We have coefficient, variable, term. I think in your textbook, it only asks for coefficient and term, and that's okay. If it doesn't ask for something, you don't have to write it out. Now, I'm going to show you something with this one. This can also be written as 15 over 25 AB. Okay. So our coefficient is the full fraction. You do not have to simplify fractions in this lesson. So our coefficient here is going to be 15/25. That's our coefficient. Okay. Your variables are the letters. So we have an A and we have a B. And then for term, we don't have any addition, subtraction, or an equal sign. So there's just one term. So what I would like for you to do right now is I want you to try example 9 and 10 on your own or with your partners. And then we will look at the homework after that. Okay, so for example 9, does anyone want to come up to the board and try this one? Okay, awesome. You want to do the next one? Would you want to do this one, or you want to? Yeah. Okay. So you're gonna have a C, a B, and a T. All right, Austin. Now, hold on before you start. If he misses something or he has it wrong, remember, we want to correctively and politely, not that he's gonna get it wrong, but just in case. So if I ever have anyone commit it before, I have to be nice about it. Go ahead. No, you just have to write it. Great, stay on there. Okay, well. That's for you. Okay, now your terms. You have 2. Yeah. That's correct. Oh. Hey, Grace. In the way that you, down in your homework again, I'm just gonna say this again, you can just put CBT. It's a coefficient. Good question. Okay, so let's look at, I want everybody to look at what she put. Good, 8/6. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. And does anyone want to explain to me the 9?
doesn't have a, right, it doesn't have a variable, so it's not a coefficient, it's a constant, so we wouldn't write that, so. Good job.
Oh,
So we have CVT. Coefficient is X, Y, Z. No, oops, sorry, I messed up right here. Coefficient is 4, 3. Variables are X, Y, Z. Are there extras? Okay, that's okay, just leave them right there, I'll get them in a minute.
so for recording that, those are the answers for 9 to 10, and that concludes lesson 1.1.